working on neck pain, a lot of times we've got to think about the rest of the spine, and we've got to think about shoulders and what shoulders mean to the neck and what trunks and abdomens. And I love starting neck work at the costal margin and diaphragm. And I also really like to think about how we've got a left-right thing with necks. We've also got like a forward and aft thing with necks, you know. And is someone's cervical vertebrae gotten so tight in the sternocleidomastoid that it shortens their cervical spine and it makes it feel really tight? They'll get really engaged, but it isn't necessarily that is the culprit. And if somebody's cervical vertebrae has really got a very intense curve to it, we've got to think about what's happening at their coccyx, at their sacrum, and at their lumbars. Very often there is a direct relationship to the coccyx and the cervicals. And you'll find that if somebody's got a really, really intense curve in their neck, that their coccyx is going to be all jammed up. And finally, that atlanto-occipital junction and that relationship, we're going to do some intraoral work today. And I wanted to work on jaws a little bit. And it seems like I had one day where I had my hand in 3 people's masseter in their jaw, and they all needed it. They all really needed that work, and some of the roof of the mouth stuff. Necks at the atlanto-occipital junction, that first cervical junction, and your jaw have one continuous line. So this place that goes from this hinge and this hinge are all one thing. And if we can resolve something that's happening back there at that hinge, which it'll be really fun to explore, how do we get, it seems like there's one side that gets really locked in, and there's one side that'll move around. So if this is the atlanto-occipital junction, it is just held in place here, and usually jammed way up inside there, isn't it? You'll try to get in there, and it's jammed way up, and then there's one side that's just out in the breeze, and it's just doing everything it can for dear life. That's the painful side. The one that's jammed up is never painful. That's like the great irony of body work is that the really tight side is so rarely actually painful. Right. It's like the side that's weak and inflamed and irritated, and having hands that know what irritated tissue versus what tight tissue feels like is still something I work on, because it's like, oh, there it is, I can feel it, it's this mushy, soft, it's irritated, it's way out in the open. Same thing with rotation, right? If there's something that's rotated like this, let's say I'm rotated in this way, this side is going to be hidden and shiny and smooth and deep. And the other side, this side, is going to be way out there and it's going to feel exposed and raw, but your hands are going to find it really easy. And it's going to feel like, oh, that's where I need to work. When the reality is, you've got to bring this side back first. Emmett, before, in my most recent advanced class, or when I was in the four-handed workshop, was really hot on this idea of making space behind tissue, making space for that tissue to move into. What if our job is to say, okay, this is really tight. He'd work 4 inches behind me so that this felt comfortable going there. And I have been playing with that idea of what is it like to work beyond where somebody's tissue already is and make space for that to move into. And so we're going to work on that a little bit today. Anybody who has a neck that I can start